All right, welcome back. So now we're going to get into the control side of the course. Let's take a look at the 3 different types of buttons that we have in Q-SYS that we're going to be using as we move forward in this class. We have momentary buttons. Those are, as you can see by the graphics, sort of like a car horn. When you press it, it's on, and when you release it, it is then off. So that being the true state and the false state. Then we have the toggle button, just like your average power button that you have on your fancy new cars. When you press the button, it toggles to one state, on, and then when you press the button again, it toggles to the other state, off. And then we have trigger buttons. Trigger buttons are very different from the other two because there's something very specific about trigger buttons. They don't have a state. That's really important to remember when you're working with them as you move forward in the class or any kind of project that you have. When you press the button, it initiates an event. It doesn't actually toggle anything. It doesn't turn true or false, on or off. It's just initiating some sort of event, kind of like a bell. When you press the bell, you're not turning the bell on. The bell starts ringing, and then when it's done, it's done. All right, so these are the 3 buttons that we're going to be looking at. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at what I was just kind of talking about. Here we have sort of a graph representing exactly what that momentary button is doing. When you press it, it jumps up to 1, it's true, it's on, it stays there until you release it, then it goes back to off, false, and that is the momentary button. The toggle button, when you press it, jumps up to 1, it's true, it stays there as long as you don't press it again, but when you press it again, then it's going to go back to off or false. And then the trigger button, when you press it, it's just out there in the ether. Nothing happens with zeros or ones, trues or false, ons or off. It's initiating that event. So we're not going to get that kind of feedback. Now, every single type of control in Q-SYS has up to 3 different types of data. You have string, value, and position. The string is the textual representation of the button or the control. So in the case of, let's say, something like a gain knob, if the gain knob is set to 20 dB, the string would be 20 dB. It's the full written out kind of description of what that control is set at. The value, on the other hand, is a numerical representation of that button or control. That being, if it is 20 dB being our gain knob, the value would be 20, just that numerical representation of what it's set at. Now, position is also a numerical representation, but don't get it confused with value, because what it is, let's think of it as a range of 0 to 1. And more sort of like a percentage between those points. You're looking at the full position range of that control or button. If you're looking at something like that gain knob being set at 20 dB, that means that it's set at 1 for its position. That's the top of its range. It's going all the way from the bottom to the top, 20 dB being the top range at 1. Now, I could explain this in a number of different ways, and hearing all of these descriptions might sort of make sense, but if they don't, maybe it's better that we get a visual representation of this. So I actually have a design that can help us check this out. In the folder, you should have it too, actually. In the folder that you downloaded at the beginning of class, you should find this. There should also be a link just below the video if you don't have it in front of you. It is Control Component Example version 1-1. I'm going to open that up. You can follow along if you want to open it up as well. You don't have to. You can just watch. There are a few different tabs in this design itself. I really want to just focus on this first one that came up here. This is a great representation of the string, the value, and the position in any sort of control. If I jump into emulation mode really quick, here at the top we have a level knob. This is exactly what I was talking about. See, if I jump all the way up to the top of it, there our string is 20 dB, our value is 20, and our position is 1. Well, thinking of that, if I drop that down about halfway, you'll notice that the position now is halfway through that point. It's 0.49, I got pretty close to halfway. The value is negative 40.7, the string negative 40.7 dB. This gets tricky sometimes when people look at buttons on the other hand. If we look at something like the mute button, which has a rare exception of having a string of unmuted and muted rather than true or false, the value is 0 and the position is 0. If I turn that mute button on, the value is 1 and the position is 1. So don't get confused thinking that the value and position are usually going to be the same thing. That's typically only the case in something like buttons like these, where they don't really have a range going between 0 and 1. They have two options. It's binary, 0 or 1, true or false, muted or unmuted. You can take a look at the rest of these on your own time if you'd like to, just to get an idea of it. Toggle button, integer knob. The text field, not going to have a value or position. It's just text, so that string is the only data that's passing through there. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of the visual representation of those three types of data that these controls can share.